Okay, so Donald Trump is the new president of the United States as of January. I think that's, good news for the country because obviously the Democrat administration was destroying the country with inflation, crime, foreign wars, bad border policy, bad energy policy, bad economic policy, just absolute rejection of all of the Democrat policies by the American people. I think it's the best thing that could have occurred. All I can say now is let's hope that Donald Trump once again puts in place the policy and follows through as he did before with his political promises during the campaign. I pointed out Trump is the only president that actually did while he was president what he promised to do while he was running for office. Let's hope the same thing happens again, right? Okay, so Joe Biden is tossed out on his can. Now, what will his legacy be? Will his legacy be one of senile dementia as a Parkinson's victim with an open border, uncontrollable migration, crime, inflation, foreign wars, the destruction of the quality of life? Or does he have a chance to still save his legacy? And I say he does. He doesn't have to be remembered as the inflation senile failure that he's going to be right now. He could still be remembered as the man that gave us our first female president. All he has to do is pardon Hunter for the money crimes and resign. Let Kamala become president, and she pardons him for the money crimes. And then Donald Trump can't send him to prison or his son, where they both belong, and he rewrites his legacy. So, am I the only one who thinks it's the penultimate irony that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris let in over 12 million illegal aliens across the last 4 years, and in this election, they lost 12 million votes because of the policy rejections of the American people at the polls? Biden got 81 million last time. This time, Harris only got 69 million. They lost one voter for every single illegal alien they let in. And that's the penultimate irony. Absolutely. Talk about paying for policy with every dollar you put in or every individual you let in. And we need to fix that, but fast, don't we? Finish the wall, close the border, control the immigration, let in those who are qualified and can contribute, not just those who can walk and demand money and food and housing. And, oh God, I'm not going to get into it. So, the Dems are in denial. The party has collapsed. Now all the mainstream media, liberal pundits are trying to make up excuses. Oh, it's racism. Oh, it's misogyny. Oh, they're afraid of a woman president. The black men don't want to be. They're all idiots. They're all idiots. It's got nothing to do with her color or her race or her gender. It has to do with the failure of the policies that she partnered with Joe Biden to put in place and enforce for the last 4 years. Weaponizing the justice system, the law system, crime running rampant, inflation off the board, the border, the economy being so slow for Main Street. Well, it's wonderful for Wall Street. It's exactly the opposite of what the Democrats claim. The Republicans are for the rich and we're for the common man. Baloney! That's gone. That's why the labor union sided with Trump. That's why the Teamsters went with Trump. That's why the Hispanics went with Trump. Because the labor class has been abandoned by the Democrat Party so they could push their socialism down the throats of what they thought was an obedient and subservient base. I mean, immigration, the gangs and the cartels running the fentanyl in the streets all over America, in the city, and the Biden administration just let it all go. This should be the target of the DOJ and the FBI, not Donald Trump. So they're self-destructing and imploding as a party. They're breaking apart because they're not really a Democrat party anymore. They, of course, have been turned into the Socialist Party. They've been that way since Bernie Sanders controlled the election primaries in the 2016 election. He had won all the primaries, but at the convention, the Democrats used a whole group of superdelegates to select and appoint Hillary Clinton in place of the preferred candidate of the party by virtue of the primary elections. Bernie Sanders had won all of those, but Hillary got appointed. Some democratic process they're running, huh? Democracy, democracy, democracy. They're the ones destroying democracy. This is the second time they've thrown away the candidates selected in the primary elections and replaced them with someone who was selected, didn't win the primary, didn't run, and in fact has never won an electoral college vote in her entire political career because she withdrew before they got to any actual state college. She withdrew without ever winning an electoral college vote. She's one of the first candidates out. So the democratic process is being destroyed, not by the Republicans, but by the Democrats. And they don't even know that they've become the Socialist Party. The old leadership is about to be kicked. Pelosi, Schumer, Nadler, all these old folks who think they're Democrat, the party's Democrat, have got to go and be replaced with the others, younger, who are pushing socialism under Bernie Sanders. And the socialists, of course, co-opted Joe Biden's administration, took advantage of the senile moron to put in place a whole bunch of socialist policies that he has never been in support of for his entire life. But now he'll repeat whatever they tell him to say. He'll read whatever they put on the teleprompter, and he wants to please everyone around him. So he's basically abandoned his historical positions of being a moderate Democrat in the middle. His whole administration has been as far left as it could get, and that's because the party has been co-opted by socialists and socialism. It's now the Socialist Party of America, not the Democrat Party. And might I add in closing, we're not a democracy. We are not a democracy. Get it straight. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. Every time somebody on the news says democracy, 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 somebody should be yelling from the back of the stage, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. We are a democratic constitutional republic in the sense that we have a system of one man and one vote. But we are not a democracy because the majority does not rule. The law controls all, both the majority and the minority. Or rather, both the minority and the majority. It doesn't allow the majority to write law that only applies to the majority. The same law applies to everyone. The law rules, not the majority. And the law cannot be written so that it is different for the poor or the wealthy or the black or the white or the Jew or the Christian or the Muslim or the Hindu or the Islam or the Irishman or the German or the Ethiopian. You got to have the same law for everyone. You can't discriminate on sex, gender, age, national origin, or wealth. Sound familiar? Yeah, the tax brackets enforced against citizens are unconstitutional. It's not uniform law. It's completely unconstitutional. It's responsible for the class warfare that's been devouring America. We're not a democracy. We're a republic, constitutional republic, and the judges have perverted and subverted the law under the Republic to allow it to be used to create this class warfare system that keeps the American people divided and fighting amongst themselves rather than unified under a representative government, because the government doesn't represent anymore, it rules. It rules, it jams its agenda down the American people's throats. It doesn't do what they want. They want cheap gasoline, cheap food. So what do? Turn off the carbon and cheap energy. Turn off the nuclear power plants. Where's the cheap energy? It's gone. And when energy is expensive, government will control you as it rations out the energy you need to maintain the existence and quality of life you're used to. It's literally the first thing socialist governments do when they take over, or socialist movements do when they take over and become the government, is they nationalize the energy grid and control the distribution of energy, along with taking over the education system to control the dissemination of information. So we have a Democrat Party that doesn't know it's socialist and a Republican Party that has been completely remade by the centrist populist policies of Donald Trump, which has brought together people from both the left and the right to some extent. Obviously, most of the left is still insane, but like I say, Donald Trump ate into the Jewish bloc, which is historically Democrat because of Biden's policy in Israel. He ate into the labor bloc with the Teamsters and others because of because the Biden administration has been anti-labor, been bad for work. And he ate into the youth vote because the youth are sick of not being able to keep the money they make, having things be unaffordable for them, and the Democrats focusing on nothing but woke, rather than real economic policy that would provide better opportunities, stronger wages, lower taxes for the average working man, which the youth suffer with the greatest because, of course, they're just starting and they're at the lower end of the wage agreement. And when you're making minimum wage or just a little bit above that, beginning in your work as you learn a new skill or career or get brought into the office or fold, you're not getting paid a lot. So when things cost more, you get hurt. And that's what's been happening. So Trump has unified that middle, that just left of center and just right of center, as well as, of course, the entire right, all the way to the far extreme, which is what the Democrats keep yelling about. But it's all nonsense. Donald Trump is not an extreme far-right politician. He's a populist. He's a centrist. And he's going to put in place energy policies that will lower the cost of electricity, gasoline, and diesel fuel by allowing fracking and going back to the drill, baby, drill, and becoming once again energy independent so that America can be the one that controls the price of oil on the markets rather than Saudi Arabia and OPEC. And that will drive the price of oil back down to $55, $60 a barrel. I don't think you're ever going to see 40 again, but 55, 60 is low enough to put Russia and Iran out of business, because it's selling oil that is funding Russia's war in the Ukraine and Iranian funding of terrorism through Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in the Red Sea area out of Yemen, I think. That's how the Iranians are able to fund all of that. In addition to, what's the $6 billion that they released is actually nothing compared to the $100 billion they've allowed them to make selling oil. So there you have it. Okay, everyone should tune in and listen to my show this evening, every Thursday, 6 o'clock on the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. You can listen online. There's an online link right there at the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Every Thursday from 6 to 7, I do a lecture information discussion with myself about the state of the economy, Donald Trump's policies, and of course, the income tax laws and the maladministration of the income tax by the IRS, DOJ, and lower judges of the federal district and circuit courts of appeals for the last 50 years, which have been committing a constitutional fraud on the American people of the largest and most monstrous scale ever perpetrated in American history. For 50 years, the courts have been enforcing the income tax as a non-apportioned direct tax on all income of citizens. But in June, the Supreme Court ruled in Moore et al. V. United States that income taxes are indirect taxes under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. It's not a non-apportioned direct tax under authority of the 16th Amendment at all. That doesn't exist. The Supreme Court reviewed comprehensively all of the constitutional foundations for all of the constitutional federal taxation that's allowed. Direct taxes must be apportioned. Indirect taxes are uniform and consist of impost duties and excises, and income taxes are part of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. They're not a fourth power to tax. No new powers are created. No new subjects are created. It's not a fourth power. It's not a new power to tax directly. Income is the function by which the amount of the impost duty and excise tax that is owed is calculated or measured. Income is the yardstick that measures the amount of tax owed on the earnings derived from the activity or transaction subject to the impost duty or excise. It's not the object of the tax. It's not the subject of taxation. The IRS, the DOJ, and the federal courts, both district and circuit, have been in rebellion against the Constitution, rebellion against the Supreme Court, rebellion against the limited form of government, rebellion against limited taxation that prohibits them from taxing the labors of the American people. That power does not exist under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. That's why they had to claim it was the 16th Amendment that allowed them to tax your earnings directly as though it was a function of federal power to tax, because there's no authority to tax labor under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. It doesn't exist. So in order to tax your labor, salaries and wages resulting from your work, the exercise of the simple right to work at an occupation of common law, not involving any import, export, or excise taxable activity, no license, no commodities, you have a right to that occupation at common law, and federal government has no jurisdiction to tax your labor under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. In fact, there's a statute, Title 15, Section 17, that says the labor of a human being is not a commodity or article of commerce. And the intent of that statute, which was passed by Congress at the urging of the labor unions in the middle 30s, when the labor unions realized Congress was going to start taxing the labor of the American people, and the only basis upon which it could be done was excise. Because at the time they knew the 16th Amendment didn't confer any new power and didn't apply to the American people. It was a tariff that was collected from foreign persons, not a direct tax. And when they had Social Security come into play, the labor unions saw they're going to tax labor, so they had Congress declare the labor of a human being, Title 15, Section 17, the labor of a human being is not a commodity or article of commerce. And of course, it's commodities and articles of commerce that are subject to taxation by excise, along with licenses to pursue certain occupation, things like selling alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and along with the corporate privilege, where it is the privilege that is the subject of the tax, not the mere earning of money or having of income. It is the privilege that is the subject of the corporate excise. And there is no privilege enjoyed when a citizen earns money. All of their earnings come from an exercise of rights, not any enjoyed privilege that would make earnings from any source taxable to the citizen. It's all by right. It's only the corporate person that is subject to tax on their compensation, on their interest, on their rent, on their dividends, on all of their other sources as well, including foreign. because it's the privilege of incorporation that's being taxed, not the activity in the foreign country, where the government couldn't tax a citizen, but can tax the corporation because it's the privilege, and the privilege is enjoyed all over the world, and it can be taxed all over the world. Doesn't have to be here in America because it's the privilege of incorporation that is the subject of the tax, and it's measured by all earnings, profit and all earnings. A citizen, on the other hand, doesn't earn money by privilege. He earns money through the enjoyment and the exercise of the right to work. It's not a taxable source to the federal government. The tax has been maladministered since World War II, as though it were a direct tax on labor. All of the IRS's frivolous position documents repeatedly assert and cite all of the cases from each of the different circuit courts where it's been held. The income tax is a non-apportioned direct tax. That's what the Supreme Court said in Brushaber versus Union Pacific. Well, that's a lie. That's a blatant lie. Lie, lie, lie. The Supreme Court just said, citing Brushaber, income taxes are indirect taxes. Direct taxes must be apportioned. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And by citing Brushaber, they create 108 years of undisturbed controlling precedent that forecloses the possibility of any intervening law, like the victory tax, ever having been put in place as a legitimate direct tax. That only changed in 2018 when Donald Trump signed the new tax law Congress enacted there under what's declared in the congressional record as the constitutional authority for the tax, which was declared to be Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, not the 16th Amendment. The courts have been lying to you. The courts have been lying to you. This is sedition at the highest level, perversion and subversion by the federal judges of the Circuit Courts of Appeals. They should all be arrested and hung right after trial. This is open rebellion and sedition that the Supreme Court, until this court, refused to address and allowed to go on. But this court is knocking out all the liberal crime perpetrated by the Supreme Court during the Civil Rights era, when they allowed Roe v. Wade, made up a right that doesn't exist. There's no medical, abortion, health care, nothing in the Constitution. Those are state functions. So they threw away Roe v. Wade. They threw away affirmative action. Oh yeah, the cure to discrimination is reverse discrimination. Right, check. I'm sure that'll work out real well. They threw out regulatory deference. The agencies can't make up their own law with regulations anymore. You have to go to the statute. If the statute doesn't allow it, the regulations can't provide for it. And now they've thrown out the income tax as a non-apportioned direct tax. Nonsense, which I've been exposing for 35 years. 35 years. And in the last 25, I've been asking the court to do exactly what they did in this Moore case, and that is reaffirm Brushaber. Foreclose on the possibility of any argument that there ever has been a direct non-apportioned tax on income. It's 50 years of judicial fraud. This started with real vigor in the mid-70s, and in the early 1980s, the courts had all started issuing these rulings, which are all cited in the frivolous position document. It's frivolous to argue the tax is indirect under Article 1, Section 8. Somebody better tell the Supreme Court, because they say just the opposite. It's frivolous to argue it's a non-apportioned direct tax. No such authority has ever existed. That's the frivolous argument. Do you know how many people have been fined $25,000 in tax court and the appeals courts for making the proper constitutional argument that was rejected by the circuit courts? This is a $1 trillion class action. It's a $1 trillion class action over home foreclosures, all done fraudulently, constitutional fraud. And it's $1 trillion class action for everyone who's been put in jail for at least the last 10 years, if not the last 50. They've been doing asbestos litigation for 50 years. Why shouldn't they do this? Elements of the federal government entered into a seditious rebellion and have been pushing, literally, communism down the throats of the American people in place of constitutional taxation. Why do I say that? Well, what's the second plank of the Communist Manifesto? It reads, a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. Income tax is the second plank of the Communist Manifesto. Graduated taxation. That's where you find graduated taxation, non-uniform taxation. That's where you find it is in the manifesto, to divide the population and keep them fighting amongst another so the Politburo can loot the treasury and rule the violence, because they're constantly being called upon by both sides of the population to step in, intervene, and end the class warfare conflict that they engineered with the different laws for the different classes. So they're enforcing communism, graduated income tax. The Constitution requires uniformity of taxation. It doesn't allow for graduated taxation. And if you research it, you find that graduated tax brackets are based on, from a series of decisions in the 1860s to the 1880s, are based on the power of Congress to discriminate against the inanimate commodities and articles of commerce subject to tax, and to discriminate against the inanimate corporate person or the privileged foreign person. So graduated tax brackets are based on the power of Congress to discriminate. So I ask you, what power does Congress have to discriminate against any group of American people? Blacks, Jews, Islam, Irish, German, Japanese, the old, women, gays? Who can they discriminate against? The wealthy? Oh yeah, that's right, we let them do that. Can't discriminate against anybody else. But if you're successful and you make money, you get discriminated against in tax law. It's completely unconstitutional. It's always been unconstitutional when enforced against the American people, which in the law, it isn't. It isn't enforced against the American people. It isn't. If you don't understand that, you need to go here, taxfreedom.com, and start reading and get informed. The income tax is a complete and total constitutional fraud as enforced by the IRS, as argued and enforced by the DOJ and the courts, and as held by the lower federal district and circuit courts for the last 45 years. But the fraud has been exposed in more, and it absolutely applies because they did a comprehensive review of the entire constitutional foundation for all federal taxation. And believe me, that's not going to change. Those foundations are not going to change in the next case that they take and review. Direct taxes aren't going to be relieved of the apportionment requirement in order to let them tax labor in the name of income. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 isn't going to be deemed to create any powers to tax other than impost, duty, and excise. So the foundations aren't going to change. It is relevant, and it is absolutely catastrophically fatal to the IRS's assessment claims, substitute for return claims, requirement to file claims, the DOJ's arguments in court that you're liable for the tax, that you had to file, that you didn't pay, and every criminal claim based in Title 26 tax law, or a failure thereof based on the premise that it's a direct tax on labor that you didn't pay. That's all fraud. That's all constitutional fraud, and this Supreme Court decision exposes that fraud from top to bottom, cuts it bare open to the bone. The only thing necessary is for the rest of you to wake up and become aware of this information. It's all right here on taxfreedom.com. You want your freedom back? Get informed, get educated. An uneducated population will never be free. It will always be taken advantage of in one way or another. And boy, have they taken advantage of the American people. So wake up, get informed, take back your country, help Donald Trump take back the nation and take back our legacy of freedom. Okay, this is Thomas Freed. I'll be back on air tonight, Thursday, 6 o'clock, every Thursday for 1 hour from 6 to 7. Tune in, get informed, listen up, start reading. That's the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com, TaxFreedom.com. And if you need help answering the IRS or answering the Department of Justice in court, or if you want to go after them for wrongfully convicting you within the last 3 years, or wrongfully taking your home, I'd say within the last 7, get over to the website, get in touch with me, and we'll start working on what we can do for you. Okay, this is Thomas Freed, IRSZoom.com, TaxFreedom.com, and LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com. Every Thursday, 6 p.m. for 1 hour. Listen in, get educated, get wise, get informed, get free.